Good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome on into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight. I'm Kaylee Nix here with the one, the only, the much undisputed, always imitated, but never quite gotten there, Thomas Wasson. And it's time for Loaded and Rolling. Thomas, how you doing on this Thursday?
Oh, we're loaded and rolling with information. Prepare to get loaded up with knowledge.
There you go. It's been a while since we've been here. We've had kind of a weird schedule that always happens to us in June, right? You come off of the Memorial Day holiday. We typically roll right into future of supply chain. And then before you know it, it's the second to last week of June and you're staring down the dog days of summer and you're like, oh my God, where did this month go? And we've got a lot of topics to get through today, so let's get there. First off, seatbelts, seatbelts, seatbelts. As somebody says, seatbelts so we can be safe. But truckers might not all think the same way. Tell us why.
This is what's wild. So what spurred this was the FMCSA requested money for a study to ask drivers their thoughts about wearing seatbelts.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking to myself, why do you need to ask drivers if they wear seatbelts? The regulations say they're supposed to. Well, recent data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said that between the 2020 through all the way up of 2022, over half, we're talking like as of 2022, 70% basically, rounding up, 69 point whatever percent, of all deaths by large trucks not wearing your seatbelt. And it's pretty obvious, you can tell during these accidents if you're not wearing your seatbelt because results will be a lot worse than if you do. So it turns out that wearing your seatbelt is a large problem in trucking.
And you would think that this is something that should be common sense, right? Seatbelts were invented and widely used starting in like the late 80s, early 90s. So we're sitting on like 35 to 40 years of solid data that, yes, seatbelts keep people safer in passenger cars. Of course, it would translate to keeping people safer in these large, gigantic trucks that are rolling down the road. Why do we think there is so much driver hesitancy to wear a seatbelt? Is it that old adage of like, nobody's going to step on me and tell me that I need to be safe in my own truck? Or is it just a simple fact of they think that they're in such a big space that they're immune from the repercussions of an accident?
Here's one of my theories about it is the average driver age can be, depending upon who you ask, 45 to 55 years old. So the seatbelts, you had a great point in the 80s. You know, it wasn't always seatbelts in vehicles. So this age cohort of drivers, in my personal opinion, is probably statistically more likely to be the type. Because I remember when I was young, I'm a millennial, so I'm aging myself here. There was still amongst car people, they were like, I don't want to wear my seatbelts. You don't hear that anymore among younger generations. Most people wear their seatbelts. But from a larger, older driver cohort standpoint, that's one of my theories. And then it just happens to be that when you get in an accident and you're in that larger vehicle, you're in that cab, you're going to have a worse outcome because Isaac Newton doesn't play. And his laws of motion and thermodynamics, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, physics does not stop for anybody, and gravity impacts us all equally at 9.8 meters per second in terms of acceleration. But Thomas, let's kind of wrap this up by talking about some of the safety statistics and what it looks like from a hazards and violation standpoint. Because as we all know, Road Check Week happens, but not just in that type of week where you also have scrutiny all the time. If you are maybe a driver, you're being looked at by state troopers and by folks on the safety road. They pull you over and you're not wearing a seatbelt. That's a violation. Goes on your record, goes back to your company. If you're a company driver, if you're an owner operator, like, you know, you're your own boss, so whatever. But it goes on your record and then it will show up in a safety score likely. And then people are less likely to book freight with you.
Correct. CVSA safety scores. If your score is, so it's either higher or lower, the scoring system basically means that it's like opening a can of Pringles. Once you start, you just can't stop. So that's the same with inspections. If you're below a certain threshold, they don't mess with you because they assume that you don't suck. But guess what? Turns out you get a few out of services, failure to wear your seatbelt, have a tail light, a lamp out. They call them lamps, by the way. There's a doctrinal term, lamps, that's going to go up. As your score gets negatively impacted is the key thing. You will actually get inspected more. So it's one of those situations where, you know, out of the 916 truck drivers who died in 2022, I just want to give a number here just to give the statistic. 635 were not wearing the belt. So it's not as if tens of thousands of drivers are dying, but when it does happen, the belt is one of the things. And it's remarkable because you would assume that once you get stopped during your inspections, you would have to picture that you just suddenly decide to buckle up, or are you stopped and you still don't have a belt on, and I'm thinking the other thing is there may just be a subset of the population who can't understand the second order of effects, but somehow managed to get a CDL. And so maybe it's like, well, I'm just going to leave my belt off while he's inspecting me when I pull into the weigh station. I have some theories. We're going to need some reporting on this.
And you're like, it's just one step. It's literally just pull. I guess it's 2 steps. Pull, click.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even do you get cited because the officer, you make eye contact as you're going through, and then you're just like,
and you're like, oh no, I don't know.
And then does he look at you and you'll be like, I got you,
Like, I got you.
Like that. So there is another part. There's a great term in the law. There's the actus rei and the mens rea. The actus rei is the act in and of itself when you're screwing up the law. The mens rea is the thought process behind it. What is the thought process? Yeah, the act in and of itself is you need to have that belt on. There's the CFR that says it, but the thought process behind it. So motor carriers, my recommendation to you is if you have a driver who has a safety belt violation, that is like the equivalent of a cockroach in a buffet style restaurant, because there's more problems. If you can't buckle up, they've tipped the hand. Get rid of them.
It's like
don't keep them.
You know that it's there. You just gotta dig a little deeper to find what else is going on.
It's a can of worms.
It's a can of worms. All right, Thomas, let's finish this up by talking a little bit about some June data coming out of Motive, talking about their economic report for the month. And this is interesting because it still shows that Americans are spending money. And it's like, why is the freight market not continuing to respond as much if Americans are still putting out this much cash by visiting these many big box retailers?
It's fascinating. It's a tale of two economies. And I think that over the past 4 years with the pandemic, we saw a lot of people moving, a lot of remote work. There was a lot of, especially with interest rates. So those who still have their houses, like your friend here, at a lower interest rate, even though I could have cashed out and got a better house, I have more money to spend because my mortgage, which is right now $1,000, if I refinanced and bought my house at its current value, would be $2,800 a month. So literally, that's what we're looking at from actual consumers is like your $1,000 mortgage in 2015, when I got mine, is all the way up to like 18 before they really started messing with the rates, 19, is now if I refinanced and repurchased it, 2,800. That's the people who are not able. But for those who are still locked in, we're seeing it. Let's look at the index. Big Box Retail Index. Visits in May to top 50 U.S. retailers, up 4% compared to April, up nearly 8% compared to last year. That's geofence data from Motive Telematics. So who's showing up to your retailers and they're pulling the geofence data? Mm-hmm. Other interesting thing as well. Who were the winners year over year? Home improvement, nearly 30%. Department stores, apparel, and electronics, 27%. Grocery and superstores, 22.6%. So compared to last year alone, we are seeing some winners, but at the same time, the structural changes in the economy are still kind of waiting for the dust to settle.
Yeah. I would be really interested to see how that data correlates with data of actual spend at those retailers, because like I know personally, I like to walk into a Home Depot and like walk around and check out the projects and then spend like an hour in the garden center. Maybe I walk out without buying anything, but I still manage to make it there, right? Is that the data that we're talking about? It's just visits to the store, going in, going out?
Yeah, in and out data. So we don't have as though their purchasing was done, which would be really cool because the stores themselves have it. I'm sure Home Depot has like...
Yeah, it'd be cool to kind of co-locate that data with each other.
Yeah, because I mean, also for this big box retailer index, you could also assume that are these moving into distribution centers? Mm-hmm. So are we seeing more additional upstream activity? Is this a private fleet? Is this a for-hire fleet? So there's a lot of stuff in between this number that I think is fascinating. And that's one of the big trends that we're not hearing a lot about is that those same fleets like your Walmart, which is being the largest trucking companies if they decided to ever go public for hire, their private fleet has increased. So, it's not just a thing of like, well, we are spending more, but it's not just suddenly trickling down in the for-hire space.
No.
These private, even Tyson, the chicken people, have like 7,000 to 8,000 trucks for chickens. So yes, when we talk about the impacts of the macro economy, it's not just a one-for-one where the for-hire segment's just getting a bonanza if more people buy stuff.
Right. Well, it would be interesting to see that together. So maybe Motive, we can link that up together if we get that data from the stores. All right, Thomas, thanks for being here for our Loaded and Rolling Communities update. Of course, we've got the show next Tuesday right here at 2 o'clock on FreightWaves TV. People can find the newsletter on FreightWaves.com. We'll see you next week.